welcome to this introductory lecture on microeconomics. Continuing from where we left off and going straight in, we're going to be talking today about marginals, averages and totals. The marginal refers to the extra or additional. For example, marginal costs are the extra or additional units of cost for producing an additional unit of output. Marginal revenue is the extra revenue from selling another unit. This can be seen to be reflected on the table in front of you, whereby the number of units goes up sequentially. The total fixed costs goes up. The total costs go up from an initial 7 with no production right up to 143, and the marginal costs go up from an initial 0 up to 40. As you can see, the marginal changes differently to, or incrementally differently to, the total costs. In short, if marginal figures are negative, totals will fall, and if positive, totals will increase. That's reflected on the graphs which you can see in front of you now. I'll just give you a moment to take that in. Just a reminder, in the short run is the period of time where at least one factor of production is fixed, and in the long run, all factors are variable. The law of diminishing returns, or the law of variable proportions. This law states that an extra unit of one factor of production are employed, as extra units of one factor of production are employed, with all of this held constant, the output generated by each additional unit will eventually fall. In effect, that the marginal product of all factors declines when they are employed in increasing quantities. The diminishing return should not be confused with negative returns. Successively adding workers to a factory can increase its total output, but at a falling rate. Only when the factory becomes overcrowded would the presence of an extra worker actually cause production to fall. Again, we should note that the law of diminishing returns assumes several things. First, that at least one factor is fixed. Each unit of variable factor is the same. Each worker is equally trained, in other words, and the level of technology is held constant. If we assume labour is a variable factor, at first there are increasing returns, subsequently marginal product falls as diminishing returns to a factor set in. This is represented in the table in front of you. In terms of output, the productivity abbreviations above may be thought to be the following. Total output produced by factors of production is TP, average product AP, the output per unit of the variable factor, the output per worker, also called labour productivity. Marginal product, or MP, the extra output from employing another unit of a variable factor, e.g. the extra output from employing an additional worker. Therefore, if the marginal product is greater than the average product, the average price increases. If the marginal product is less than the average product, then the average product decreases. The marginal product crosses the average product curve at the maximum point on the average product. That's reflected on the illustration in front of you. Productivity is an output per factor. In other words, output per worker. Employee productivity can increase with more training, more capital equipment, better management, and or improved technology. Costs are expenses of the business and represent the value of the inputs used up. Costs may include materials, labour, depreciation of equipment, the cost of capital and opportunity cost of capital. Total cost consists of two factors. First, variable costs, these being the costs that vary with output, material costs varying with production, for example, and fixed costs, these costs which do not vary with output, such as overheads or rent. This is represented in the illustration to follow. So the variable costs vary with diminishing returns, and fixed costs are fixed. The variable costs of VC and FC add together to make the total cost, which is a shift upwards of the variable cost due to the summation of the variable cost and the fixed cost. Marginal cost is the cost of producing another unit. The marginal cost curve is inversely related to the product in the short run. Take the case of labour input. When each worker is more productive, less time is needed to produce one additional unit of output. Assuming wages are constant, this means that the extra cost of producing a unit will fall. When each extra worker is less productive, more of their time will be needed to make an extra unit of the marginal cost of the unit. When each extra worker is less productive, more of their time will be needed to make an extra unit, so the marginal cost of the unit will rise. The formula for the calculation of cost elements in the structure is shown on the table in front of you. Total cost is a summation, or the total, the aggregate, or, in other words, the addition of fixed costs and variable costs. Formula FC plus VC. Average cost, total cost divided by output. Total costs divided by Q, which is output, or quantity. Average variable costs divided by output, variable costs divided by quantity. Average fixed cost divided by output, FC divided by Q. Marginal costs, the change in total costs divided by the change in output. The formula that you'll see to the right there in the bottom right hand corner is a little triangle is included in the formula. The little triangle means the change in, so it's the change in total costs divided by the change in quantity, or the change in output, that determines marginal cost. Now, if you don't know economics very well, and if you've not done basic economic theory before, you may wish to commit them to memory. They will serve you well. They will help you in the future. Average costs and average variable costs and average fixed costs are represented on the diagram in front of you. Average fixed costs are thought to decrease over the long term, with average variable costs increasing due to diminishing returns, meaning that the average costs, when equated to average total costs, which is the fixed cost plus the variable costs average, next to top line. If the extra cost of making a unit, the marginal cost, is greater than the cost of a unit on average, this will increase the average cost. If each unit costs £5 to make, the next one costs £20, the average will rise. If the extra cost of making the unit, the marginal cost, is less than the cost per unit, the average cost will fall. For example, the average cost of making a unit is £5, but if the firm produces one for £1, this will bring down the average cost. So then, if marginal cost is greater than average cost rises. If marginal cost is less than average cost, then average cost falls. So this means that marginal cost crosses the average cost at its minimum point, and that's the unique symbol of this market form we're about to talk about in a moment. You must always remember that the marginal cost cuts through the average cost at its minimum point. Long run cost curves. In the long run, all factors of production are variable, from short run cost curves to long run cost curves. A short run average cost, SRAC, shows the minimum cost per unit for different levels of output given a fixed factor. For example, the number of capital machines working in a factory. There will be an infinite number of cost curves in the short run depending on the constraint. For example, should the number of machines double in a factory, then output and cost would adjust accordingly. As the firm changes its fixed factor over time, adding additional machinery, we move into successive new short-run average total cost curves. This occurs for many reasons, including if the firm expands, it moves to a new lower short-run average cost curve. It experiences internal economies of scale. If a firm expands, it moves onto a long-term average cost curve at the same level. It experiences constant returns to scale. If a firm expands, it moves onto a higher short-run average cost curve. It experiences internal diseconomies of scale. These are three three reasons which can account for the long run average cost curve, which is depicted in front of you, forming an aggregate representation of the short run average cost curves linked